Hi everybody. I see there's some chat from before. For those of you joining me now, let's see if anybody is joining me now. For those of you joining, and for those of you just watching on the replay, I will say that I had a little bit of sickness in the family, so I had planned the live stream a little bit earlier, but this is when I could actually make it happen. So I see another human being amongst 8 billion has said what's up, and Artem has said oui. We'll get around to my pronunciation of the vowels in a moment. So let me see. Looking at my stream health, looking at everything here, making sure I'm doing all right. Okay, I'm gonna get started. I want to talk about all the vowels in the world ever. This is actually not as sort of ostentatious a plan as it sounds at first, and the reason for that is that on the one hand it's infinite, and on the other hand we have sort of fixed points, and linguists think about it in a number of ways. Any language is going to have a manageable number of vowels, a manageable number of consonants. Some languages may think that larger numbers are more manageable than others, so like, Circassian languages have just a ton of consonants. But I see hello in the chat, hello to everybody, yeah. But the vowels, there's a lot going on. The thing that makes vowels interesting is that it is some manner of sound that you create, usually through voicing your vocal cords, but not always. I'm looking at Japanese, for instance. And what happens is there's sort of 3 different parameters that we can use to characterize them. Now, vowels are infinite, but they're like a color wheel, and I'm actually going to make this a little bit more concrete in a moment. But if we take a color wheel, let's see if I can find a nice color wheel to share. One of these like fully like gradient color wheels. We have 3 things going on: red, green, blue in our eyes. And what happens is we actually, I'm gonna share this image. Let me just open a new tab and then change my screen. I guess I'm gonna visit Wikipedia for this. Here we go. All right. All right, so this is a color wheel. Many of you are familiar with this. We have 3 photoreceptors in our eyes. And I know you're probably thinking, like, why are we talking about photoreceptors in our eyes if we're talking about vowels? But bear with me, this is actually going to make sense. So in any given language, like this is basically, it's a continuous space. So you can have infinite gradations. This is, calculus comes into play here. But you have 3 things that you're reacting to, and you have all of this space. So I think you can see my mouse on here. So different languages break up the color wheel in different ways, but we don't have a term for every single color. Instead, what we do is we kind of chunk these. So we break the color wheel into different regions, and that may change over time. So for instance, for those of you who can see my mouse, going kind of straight up here, that's red in English. Historically, we had red, we had yellow, and we did not have this whole kind of region in here, in between the two. Historically, that was actually fox red, like Chaucer referred to it as fox red, or what we translate into modern English as fox red. And then later, once we got the naranj from the Persians, we started calling things that. So orange. I just saw you asking if I'm quiet. Here we go. Let's start over. And I'll be a little bit clearer. Can you tell me, Roman, can you hear me now? I'm old enough that that's a catchphrase from an ad for me. All right. A little bit better. Yeah. Checking my sources here. Audio input. I actually have my microphone by my mouth now. There we go. On the VOD, I'll just cut to here. So, hi everybody and welcome. So, just to recap what I was saying, I'm looking at the color wheel here. The color wheel. The reason I'm looking at the color wheel when talking about vowels is that it's actually a really, really good metaphor for what we do with vowels. So we have 3 photoreceptors in our eyes, 3 cones. There's also rods. The cones are, I think, red, green, and blue. But we see all of these different colors, and it's infinitely gradient. This is where calculus can come into play. So I see in the chat you have a hard time differentiating a from I. It sounds the same to me. We're going to talk about that. Now, this is an infinite color space. You can get smaller and smaller gradations. But what we do is we chunk things, we bend things. There's sort of sometimes people talk about a quantal theory of speech. It's the same thing with the eyes. So depending on your language, you may be more or less attuned to different regions of the color wheel. For instance, English has no differentiation in this kind of bottom left area, where Russian has a very strong differentiation between 2 separate color terms. It just divides it into different numbers of bends. For basic color terms, languages tend to have just a handful of those. And what I was saying a little bit earlier is that this line going straight up that I would consider red, to the right of it on the color wheel here, before you get to yellow, there's this whole region, which historically in English there wasn't a word for. And like I said, Chaucer would have called that fox red, or the equivalent of fox red in Chaucer talk. So I see in the chat, do you know Hebrew? Ktsat. I know a little bit. Working on it. Give me some time. I'm focusing on my Quebec French right now, my Persian for a couple of months, and then getting back to Hebrew a little bit more seriously. All right, so this is a perfect metaphor for the vowel space, except for instead of red, green, blue, what you have is tongue height, tongue backness or frontness, and lip rounding. You have 3 elements, but what you end up with is this sort of infinite mouth space. So what happens is the same thing. Different languages divide this up, where they divide regions into, that's one vowel, that's another vowel. So just like there's a whole region here that I would consider orange, and we don't like have a finer gradation of it, it's the same thing with languages. So somebody mentioned, let me see in the chat, said had a hard time differentiating A from E. It's, Santos said that. You may be a native Spanish speaker if that's the case, because those are not differentiated in Spanish or a ton of languages. So what I want to do is go through the vowel chart, the IPA vowel chart. There are vowels that are a little contentious. Obviously, Wikipedia is sometimes a pretty good place to start in talking about these things, but also there's a bit of history that's interesting. I'm going to use the International Phonetic Association website because there are some that are contentious, and I find that really, really interesting. So the idea here was, and I don't really care about getting the specific details right, so forgive me if I get some of them wrong. I think it was another Jones, not William Jones, just another. There's a lot of Joneses in linguistics, who was like, let's come up with a system to put like set points that are fixed points that are just a reference point. It's a frame of reference. So linguists will know or be familiar with all of these vowels, but no language uses all of these, to my knowledge. So this trapezoid is based on the assumption that you are looking at a person, and that person is facing your left. So it's like this situation. And if my tongue is high in my mouth, that's going to be the higher vowels. If my tongue is low, it's going to be the lower vowels. If it's forward, that's going to be those front, on the left. And if it is, if my lips are rounded, that'll be on the right-hand side of any of these pairs. So you notice each point of this, there's a pair. So I see I'm a native Hebrew speaker. Why is the English accent so hard for me? Maybe because we have a lot more vowels that we differentiate among and between, even though we only write 5 letters for them. So the way that this works, just to look at the chart, I want to build up from a very simple starting point because this is how I learned it. I think this is more effective than other ways that it can be taught. And then any of the vowels that might be useful to you in whatever language you're studying, you can start to compare and contrast and differentiate among and between them. Oh, the camera flipped me? All right, it's like this. So, The point is that in the top there, top left, that is a high front vowel. So I guess they're facing this way for you. So, by the way, if you hear any creaky squeakiness, I'm not suffering severe flatulence. I just have a squeaky office chair. It's from Amazon. It's a few years old, and it needs some WD-40. I see. Does the right angle straight edge go at the lips or the throat? That is back of the throat. And these are. If I maybe I can blow this up a little bit more. These are. Let's see. Let me embiggen this. Ooh, there we go. Wikipedia wants me to give money. I'm going to do that later or not at all. All right, so I'm now going to move myself over, and then you should be able to see the whole chart and see me. So there's a lot of vowels. There's a lot of symbols. Some of them look a little crazy. We're going to work our way through it, and it's going to be amazing. So maybe my office chair is trying creaky voice. Exactly. Creaky voice, by the way, creaky phonation is just anything where the vocal cords are moving lower than the threshold for our hearing, the individual like flaps of the vocal cords. I have a colleague, Lauren Spradlin, if you're watching, hi. And when I first met her, like first day I met her, within the first half hour, she's like, do you want to hear how slow I can creak? It's 17 like hertz, I think. Might want to pull myself to the slide to the left. Okay. There we go. Do I know what happened to the letters Ayin and Aleph in Hebrew? Yes, I do. And we can talk about those. Aleph used to be a glottal stop. Ayin was Ayin. And there's a variety of reasons why those kinds of things disappear. Glottal stops tend to just disappear. H's disappear. What did you miss? Not a whole lot. I'm just getting started. I made a comparison to the color wheel where I said there's 3 things that you need to understand, red, green, blue, to have like infinite colors that we can see. And now I'm saying that there are 3 things that we need to understand vowels. That is tongue height or lowness, we say height, tongue frontness or backness, and lip rounding. So this is, again, a chart where the left side is the front of the mouth, the right side is the back. They're helpfully labeled at the top, front and back. And then this says close or close, near close, close mid, mid, open mid, near open and open. I know those as high, mid, and low. Either one is fine. Close is like, or closed, sometimes people say, is like literally your tongue is close to the roof of your mouth. So some languages, I see IPA Association has their own interactive chart. Yeah, never knew. It's actually really good, and I'm going to play it because they have audio from different phoneticians, and those phoneticians disagree about some of these unusual vowels, and so we can hear the difference. All right, so the idea here is you can make infinite vowels with your mouth. You can do all of that stuff. It doesn't matter. Most of that just gets bend into one or another. So in English, we have more bends. In Spanish, they have fewer bends. They have 5 bends. So e, those are basically the same thing in Spanish. Those are meaningfully different in English. Same thing with like oo, and so on. We can get into accents, hopefully, if there's time at the end. But the idea is basically that we have set categories in our mind, and one vowel on this chart might correspond to that category in my mind, and you might have a slightly different vowel in this chart. So what is oo for me in words like goose and boot and dude and whatever in the mid-Atlantic in the United States is sometimes like goose and dude and so on. Having this chart is one of the ways that we can actually kind of talk about that more easily. By the way, I see in the chat a shout out to U. And love it. I would add nasality as a vowel characteristic in the chat. Exactly. That's something that is an additional thing that you can do with the IPA, as well as like creaky voice, breathy phonation, and so on. So let's start just basic modal phonation, like just normal voicing, not an unvoiced vowel. Again, looking at Japanese here, but just regular voicing. So your vocal cords are moving and it is unobstructed. If the airflow is obstructed, then you have some form of a consonant, like sh or zh or whatever. Pa, ba, so on. A lot of times when we talk about vowels, we put them in a frame of like, if I say ah, then I might say like ah, ba. And you'll hear that all the time. We're going to hear a few of these. It's just to hear how it interacts with consonants. And one of the things that I want to say is like, even in a particular accent with a particular vowel. So let's say I have oo for like goose. My oos are not all the same. Word to word, like even just if I say the same word over and over again, if we go back, if I, take the audio from this and see how many times I said goose, each oo is going to be slightly different. And it's going to be different depending on the sounds around it. So like the oo in like toot is slightly different than the oo in like if goog were, or I guess Google is a word. So my vowel is, we hear oo, we think of it as oo. We can categorize it with this IPA character here. That's the U, the oo sound. But the oo that I say in poop is going to be different than the oo that I say in Google. I'm not trying to come up with silly words. I'm just trying to come up with PTK, BDG, and so on. Or like I don't know, VOOV or something like these are whatever it is. So I see M and N are vowels. I said it. In some languages, there's an unspecified nasal, which is capital N, which I do kind of think of as a vowel, but we'll get to that in a moment. So let's start simple. We're going to start with, one last thing before we start simple. One last thing is that any of these with the unrounding and the rounding, they come in pairs. Cross-linguistically, there's a very, very strong preference to have unrounded front vowels and rounded back vowels. And there's a whole bunch of arguments as to why that is, but they're basically maximally different sounds. And that's a little bit different than it makes them just that much, just hit my microphone, just that much more different. You can tell I'm excited about vowels. So the simplest system that you could have theoretically, I can move my mouse pointer. Here you go. The simplest system that you can have theoretically is one central vowel where you don't move your tongue at all and you just go which hopefully you can hear this. Let me know if you hear that. And if I go to the IPA, we can hear 4 different phoneticians pronounce it. I'm going to turn my volume up here because I can't hear that. So this is Jay Essling. Jay House. Ladefoged, slightly different, right? Ladefoged and Wells, by the way, are like the usual go-to. So this is like you're not doing anything with your tongue. All right, you guys hear this is excellent. So normally what you might actually see in the real world, the simplest system is like a 3-vowel system. The low vowel might be sort of unspecified, but it'd be like high front, high back, and low. And usually the low is like a low back, like ah. So we're going to start with those. And then we're going to kind of flesh out the system more as we go. So the front vowel, represented by the letter I, is E. And I'll play this.
E.
I think that's Ladefoged. Let's find out. Let's see if we can match who that is.
E.
E.
Oh.
E.
Okay, so the tongue is high in the mouth, close to the teeth, like close to the front of the mouth, and the lips are unrounded. That is written with the letter I because in many, many European languages, that is pronounced E. English is the outlier because of the Great English Vowel Shift, and that's a separate topic for a separate day. But actually, by the end of this, maybe we'll talk about how this kind of chain shift works. So E is this vowel. It's written with the letter that like most Europeans would recognize as being E. And Americans would call I, and Brits would call I. So already we can say, okay, theoretically, like I'm getting ahead of myself, but theoretically, if you round your lips, what do you have? You have U, that's this letter Y. That's common in French. That's common in a handful of other languages. But that's something that like, we're going to talk about mechanics now, and then you can start mapping the sounds that you hear in whatever language you're interested in to the physical mechanics. But right now, if you just detach this from language, just completely detach it from language, we have a meat tube that we have different parameters that we can move around, and we're going to move them to specific set specifications. See if I can say specific more times. Now, the last thing about the shape, by the way, is that this is not 100% accurate, but it was like cutting edge accuracy for like the 1880s. The idea being that the tongue moves in a rough trapezoid in the mouth. It's a little bit more complicated than that. There's a couple of videos about it. There's another linguist who has a video about that maybe I'll put in the chat later or something. But there's, if you want to get into the weeds, there's more ways that we can think about this. I like this because it's very simple, it's very easy, and conceptually it kind of matches what people think is happening, if not what's actually happening with our tongues in our mouth. So we have one vowel, right? We have E, the high front vowel, unrounded. If we go all the way back, tongue all the way back in the mouth, but still as high as possible, and round our lips, because this is just a normal way of doing things in most languages, then you get something like ooh. 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 Now, English speakers, especially American English speakers, we have what are called off glides, which means that all of our vowels are really like 2 vowels or 3 vowels. Same for a lot of other varieties of English. So you'll notice that it takes me effort to say like ooh, because I want to say like ooh, or like ew, or like some variation where I'm moving my lips. This is a steady state, solid, like single vowel. We'll get to diphthongs and triphthongs and everything soon. So let's hear the oohs from everybody else.
Ooh.
Ooh. Ooh. Ooh. Feels like a doo-wop song. Ooh, 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 ooh. All right, so E, ooh, and then at the bottom here, this like rounded, sort of, I guess it is a serif, but it doesn't have a little hook. That is the low, unrounded back vowel. And that's something like what you would say at the doctor's office. See, are we going to talk about sliding vowels? Yes, we are. Jeff Lindsay is the name I was trying to think of. I was like, Jeff, it wasn't Jeffrey Pullum. Jeff Lindsay has a great video about the vowel space. Highly recommend it. And I was just blanking on his last name because all I could think of was Jeffrey Pullum, who's a different linguist. All right, so we have E, ooh, and
Ah.
Aw.
Ah.
I feel like J House has a little bit more lip rounding, but we can get into that in a moment. So we got 3 vowels, E, U, A. Now, in languages that have that 3 vowel system, there's all sorts of stuff in the orbit of those target points that would be considered E. So like in a language that only has those 3 vowels, I could say I in certain contexts and be like, it's E. They're the same vowel. I don't even hear the difference. A short story on that. I was in Rome with my wife and my in-laws a few years ago, and my father-in-law was asking a waiter about pronunciation because he pronounced something slightly different than he'd learned in a textbook. And I think it was like the difference between like cucchiaio and cucciaio. And he said, which one is it? And the guy said, si. He said, is it cucciaio? And he goes, si, cucchiaio. And he's like, okay, so cucchiaio. And he goes, no, cucciaio. He wasn't playing a prank on him. He just did not hear that he was making different sounds at different times in different contexts. This happens all the time. Native speakers are terrible to ask about what they do because there's all sorts of stuff that happens below the level of consciousness that we're just not aware of. And when we get asked, what do you do? We go, I think I do this. And it's like, sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. It's the reason that linguists do not just go out and ask people what they do. You actually have to like trick them into saying stuff without thinking about it. I see in the chat 2 vowels requires you to consider oo to be an allophone of what. So it is, yeah. What is the W in IPA is basically oo as a consonant as opposed to as a vowel. So okay, we have E, oo, ah, as in say ah. Now we can get into a 5-vowel system like Spanish, and I hope this way of doing it is helpful for you all. But I think we're going to go through characters that represent something that makes sense, like the letter looks like it is related to the sound that it's supposed to be, and then we start getting into weirder and weirder things as you get into more and more unusual sounds. So this was, I mean, the IPA, the International Phonetic Association, were really trying to make it as universal as possible, and so they started with things that like everybody would agree on, and then as you get weirder, you're like, okay, like, you know, for instance, you got these little O's with the lines to them, like that corresponds to how Danish spells that sound because they're the ones who have a special character for it. So 5-vowel system, you have E, and then you have something in here on the front, if you can see my mouse, usually A. A. Listen to that creaky voice at the end.
A.
That's usually the one.
A.
E.
A.
Sound like an orchestra tuning up. Okay, notice in American English there's an off glide there, so we go like A often, so like day. So this is the sound day. If you think of that as having three sounds, this is the middle one. D, A. Now, this, again, many European languages that have this letter E. I see there's supposed to be ads during the live stream. I'm so sorry, you guys. I have no idea how I specified this. If you're signed in, there shouldn't be. But it always asks me a lot of questions when I set up. I may have to... welcome, Richard. We're talking about vowels. I may have to see if I can make sure that this is nice for everybody, because I don't want you to be cut off with ads. I do want you to watch ads, but not in the middle where it's like, messing with your experience. So somebody can drop in the chat if you're active YouTubers, if you can let me know how to do that so I can make the experience a little bit nicer for you all. All right. If anybody just got hit with an ad, I apologize. So we've gotten E, U, A at the bottom here. And now we're adding, I see signed in and gotten 2 ads. You know what? I'm going to take a moment and see what my settings are and see if I can, is that something anybody knows how to change? Why do people say French is similar to Hebrew in terms of accent? My theory is that it's r. But that's a very weak theory here. All right, I'm just going to ask, because I see people talking about the ads. If anybody here knows, then drop in the chat how I can turn off the ads midstream. Otherwise, I apologize, and I will make sure that the next stream is less advertised. They've been on each time I've been on the stream. Okay, I got to fix that. Thank you for letting me know. Obviously I want to make a little bit of ad revenue, but I don't want to force people away from watching the stream. So thank you for sitting through it. I will fix that for the next stream. But on this stream, I'm a little, I'd rather just get through all the vowels. So sorry, everybody. All right. So coming back to these vowels, we have 4 now. We have A here. And again, this is like what most European languages would write that sound as. It's a little bit different for English. And then you also have O on the back here. We're going all the way back to the right-hand side. This is
O.
O. So the tongue is sort of just higher than mid-level. And the lips are rounded.
O.
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 And it's a steady state continuous vowel. So English speakers will make this a diphthong. It was like O, which is not exactly that. So now we have our little 5-vowel system. All of these IPA letters should be pretty straightforward. Like, this is not hard to remember yet. These are kind of exactly what you expect. Now we get to some weirder characters. You have E, which is epsilon. The name is epsilon. It's referred to as epsilon. Linguists call it epsilon. And it makes the sound in the word epsilon, which is really helpful. So it's E, as in my accent, bed, dead, head.
Eh.
Can we hear House again? She's the odd one out.
Eh.
The pitch is all over the place. The vowel is steady state, but the pitch is just I love it. Then on the back here, you have what's referred to as long open O. In English, it's open O in the IPA. I think there's some other names for it. This is, on its own,
O.
aw. Now, New Yorkers, we have like 3 vowels here. So we say like ooh. This is the vowel in coffee, dog, log. Unless you're from California, in which case you don't have this vowel and you just make everything coffee, dog, taco. Not that we say taco in New York, when nobody does. Canadians might. They all merge it to aw here. So far we're doing all right, but we're getting into a little bit weirder symbols, right? So we have high, close, like high, front, unrounded, E, back, rounded, high, oo. And then keeping with those 3 parameters, if we go to the front again, sort of high, mid, you have A. Open mid or low mid, you have E. And in the back, high mid, rounded, you have O. And low mid, you have aw. That's just tongue is a little bit lower. I see it's doo-wop. Yeah, doo-doo-wop is strong in here. Drop in the chat if you recognize that reference from, 1973 or something? is the British lot vowel. Lot, yes. Actually, there's some argument about that, and like this one down here in the far bottom, which is rumored to be what is used in Persian as the sort of aleph, and we'll get there very shortly. So this one on the front right, this is your tongue is low in your mouth. It is all the way to the front, and your lips are unrounded. The name of the letter is an older English letter, and it is ash. It makes the ah sound. English speakers from North America, especially before nasals, tend to make it like yeah. So this is just ah. African American English doesn't do that as much before nasals. Some regions do, some don't. But like white people in general in the United States are going to have a lot of like eas in various places. New York has a different system. Philadelphia has a different system. It depends on what what consonant follows it. The rest of the U.S. it's just before nasals, and then but just be aware that like whatever accent you're thinking of, there may be more vowels than one in the vowel that you hear. Ah. Ah. Now we're moving away from doo-wop consonants. I mean doo-wop vowels.
Ah.
Ah.
Also, you hear a little bit of disagreement here?
Ah.
Ah.
J House sounds like ah, which is a little lower, a little fronter. All right, so we have ash. Let's keep going through vowels that native English speakers will be aware of before I start adding things. I see Bostonians also have a tendency to pronounce words like top, cop, pop, like Canadians. That's the aw, right? So for ash, in my accent, and I'll do a live stream about accents later because these all move around. In my accent, ash is in cat, bad, sad, dad, absolutism. It's that sound. I see it's fascinating. Just a vowel sound can betray a person's accent. Absolutely. In other accents, this is going to be different words, and that's we'll kind of get to that. Okay, this one over here that looks like the Spartan shield, the open, unrounded, open mid back, so that's sort of low mid unrounded vowel. That is often referred to as wedge, and it is the vowel in lunch. It sometimes people think of it as like a stressed equivalent of a schwa.
Ah.
I'm noticing house is consistently the odd one out here, which is interesting to me in its own right. So this is what I would say for lunch, pub, rub. I really don't want to say these one after another, but tugboat, and so on. So the thing is, when we talk about accents, let me give you one more, and we'll talk about accents in the north of England. So let's work our way back up here. I'm staying with American English, or with English in general. This one, that's the sort of upside down Omicron. So you notice you have an O, you have an O, you have a wacky O with a an open O. You have a different kind of O. They're like recycling letters that are things. It's upside down Omicron, sometimes referred to as horseshoe. That is the one in my accent that is in words like book and took and crook and shook and so on.
Ooh.
Ooh.
What's the interval there? Somebody, if we're doing music. And you know what? Violet Beauregard said that wedge is the fuck vowel, 100%. Except for when people talk about like it's the kit vowel, it's the trap vowel. That's within one system. So I'll give you an example. If we say wedge is the fuck vowel for me, that means that in all of the words that have the equivalent vowel in my accent, so pub, I don't know, chubby, like whatever it is, if it has an sound, then for me, I will pronounce some variation of here, this wedge vowel. But for somebody from, the Night's Watch, they're going to have this open O, this ram's horn here. They're going to say pub and fook, like Jon Snow might say fook and pub and so on. So an accent is really like you start getting into, well, which vowel happens in which class of words here. So for me, wedge is the fuck vowel. I should probably just make a t-shirt and wear that on my next live streams. So we've got like most of English here, most varieties of English. But then you start getting into some other things. So let's have some fun. Let's now just go by like first principles. I see, is it really that back of vowel? I see the and vowel. You know, the vowel in rub described as central. Yeah, I see it more central. Described as central in a lot of places, and also both and in some accents and some of the research that I've done, like in the actual when you plot it in the formant frequencies, it is a little bit closer to central. This is an abstraction. See, I have an Israeli accent. I'll probably say it with an open A sound. Exactly. It's that bottom A. So like lunch. Um, that's my like stereotype of an Israeli accent. Like, do you want lunch? Whereas I would have like lunch, launch, you know, launch is not really a word for me, but I would accept it as like a Californian saying like the rocket was launched, and so on. All right, so we have a bunch more vowels. What I want to do is just kind of get through first principles. I see the wedge. The wedge always confuses me because I see it as lambda. I used to. Um, same problem. All right, so we've covered E. We've covered A. We've covered E. We've covered A. We've covered. I'm just working my way back and around. We've covered A, O, O, U. So that is like a basic sort of general American English thing with schwa in the middle, that things just kind of become. Let's now just go by first principles and associate these sounds. Will there be an all the consonant stream? I should do a stream. I had a video about the IPA consonants, but I should just do a stream and just talk through it and just say them all. What we need to do is a live stream where you type an IPA and I say what you typed. I should do that sometime, like any words in any language, so long as they're not going to get me like demonetized or kicked off YouTube. And we should do that. Uygang appreciates the title. Yeah. With a Dutch U. Let's go. Let's do this. All right. So a lot more vowels to get through. Let's go by first principles now. So we talked about E, A, A. This one down here is in formal French, and it's just lower and fronter, or lower, I guess slightly less front, but it's like lower and all the way front. Formal French historically differentiates between
Ah.
and ah. This is a Chicago accent before R. So if any of you watched The Bear, the guy's name, I would say Carm. In Chicago, you guys hear it, Carm. That's that ah. That's how I think of that. And in languages that have, even when I'm speaking French, I'm thinking Chicago, the Bears. Like that's what I'm thinking. I see the Uygang. All right. So you got Carm. What are you doing here? My car, like that's ah. That's how I remember it. Your mileage may vary, but that's what works for me. So we got all of these front unrounded. Let's do the front rounded. So just by first principles, tongue is in the same place in the mouth, same height, same backness specification, just round the lips. So if you want to make the French U, then that is E, and you can just do it. Like I encourage you, if you're in a place where you can, just do this. Just make an E sound, like the highest frontis vowel that you can, and then slowly round your lips, and where you stop, you're now speaking French. So that's U, du. Now, I see people talking about, are you French speaker? Yeah, get the French in here. Yes. I embarrassed myself and had to issue a formal apology on the platform formerly known as Twitter, because there's so many mistakes in Duolingo French that I thought I'd caught a mistake, and it was just me having a brain fart. So that was my week. All right, so let's go down. These are lax. So this small caps I, it's close to E, but it's not E. It's your tongue is a little bit more relaxed. That is I. It's the sound in like pen, like P-I-N. Let's hear these.
I.
I.
So everybody, some variation of I. Now, some languages, I mentioned there's a preference for like sort of front unrounded, back rounded, keeping everything maximally distant, but not all languages do that. So in standard Yiddish, for instance, there isn't really an E. That's how I know that like French speakers of Yiddish because there's a whole Parisian like Yiddish scene. It's how I know that they're French because they have like all these E's and like A's and like everybody else has and none of that other stuff. So we have as in pen. What would that be rounded? Well, I go This is in Dutch.
Uh.
The main takeaway that I want for people is like you can get wherever it is, you can get there from first principles. You can be like height, backness, rounding. Let me figure this out. You can compare them. So we can start comparing, like if you're learning, if you're going to Belgium and you want to differentiate between French and Dutch and so on, you can start differentiating between the U and which are very close, right? It's hard for me to have the control in my mouth to actually pronounce those separately because they feel like super close. But that's something that you can start to train. Same thing. Round it. I'm exaggerating the rounding. When I was much younger, my then girlfriend, now wife, told me that I made sort of pretentious and ridiculous faces when speaking French because I was making French face. I was actually just pronouncing the vowels correctly, and this is something that I should say her French is amazing now. But she definitely was like, "Why are you making all those faces?" Because I was like, "Oh, like, du feu alors," and she's like, "Why are you?" It's because that's how you make the vowel. All right, so this, the O with the circle, that I believe is from, like, they wrote it with Danish. These little dudes with the little pointers here, that's literally like, it's slightly lower. It's literally just pointing down. So we get What's the rounded version? So French claims to think that there's a difference between this and the last one we just talked about. That difference is almost completely predictable from like whether it's an open or closed syllable and what word it appears in. But that's a different topic. Working on that. And this is something like if you want to get your accent really good in a language that has like 28 vowels, then you're gonna have to spend some time on this, especially comparing like like all that stuff. And then we got this other one down here. Also kind of. As a native English speaker, I don't hear a huge difference there, but I know conceptually that there is one because it's different placement in the mouth. Let's go to the back. We're like most of the way done with all of the vowels in the world now. This is great. So I mentioned, let's just come up to the central up here because this is fun. I mentioned the mid-Atlantic people, instead of saying like goose and dude, saying like goose and dude. That's this with the bar. Whoa. I didn't mean to go all the way here. And what happens is languages kind of move around, like the vowels that a language has in a particular word, they kind of move around over time. Sometimes it's just one, sometimes they collapse together. So like in, California English, these two in the bottom right, the R and ah, have collapsed into just ah. But other times they move. So the great English vowel shift is basically E moved to starting with ah and being a diphthong that ends, like it kind of rises all the way up here. So you get I, which is why we call this I. It used to be called E. So I is in like night, which historically would have been said the way it's spelled, nicht. And same thing, A became E, A became A, so we write it with the letter A. Like it's just boop. And historically, my understanding, if I remember correctly, somebody can correct me because this is not my area of expertise, is that the E went first and then everything else just kind of moved up. It kind of just moved up where you pronounce it in your mouth. Languages tend to do this with the back vowels, with the U going to like and then E. So there are people in California whose U and like dude is like the French, like dude, like dude. It's just a sound shift that's in progress. It's kind of an interesting thing. So Greek has had this happen like 8 times in its history. Hebrew, this is the reason why yud and vav interchange in so many words, is because it's literally historically this stuff happened like 3,000 years ago. And then, the clock was not stopped, but slowed. And then you start to see stuff like O moves up to U to fill that in. So like if anybody's learning Yiddish on Duolingo, if you study with a textbook, they're going to say, Yiddish has like gut for good. So that's this
O,
but you actually hear people say git.
E,
And same thing, like has like aw for
Oh.
like Gott and Himmel, and a lot of people I know might say
O,
Guten Himmel, because they kind of move up. This stuff moves, so the U's move to I, the aw moves to This is a normal trajectory that happens. Let's get through the rest of the vowels and come back to that. So let's see, what do we have left? We have vowels in Chinese, right?
O,
So O and then so this one I have to just work on. This I have to start from O. It's sometimes referred to as ram's horns. I don't know if that's a common thing. I know a couple of historical linguists who call it that. You have the slightly lower version of it. And that's most of the back vowels. If we get all the way down to the bottom here,
Oh.
it is a rounded but like low back aw. So that's supposed to be what's happening in Persian. I'm not convinced, but it's supposed to be happening. I know one linguist who just doesn't believe that exists. So it's a really contentious field. I see language stamp favorite letter in Hebrew. I'm guessing it's Ain, but somebody can correct me. It's Ain in the Yemeni accent. Let's see, Australian I read it with the brackets. I read it as IPA. So we have all these like starting points, and then we have the middle here. So let's just work through these. These are all very
E,
reduced. This one usually has an R in it, and it's like how Brits say like her. Like they have like R coloring. You usually see this with a little hook that indicates an R, and that's really the only times I ever see it. As somebody says, I know native Persian speakers, and it sounds like that to them. Yeah. I see, does having a phonetically consistent alphabet affect the development of a language? And the answer is basically kind of no, because this stuff changes over time. Populations just change. There's drift in populations. Children acquire the language. They acquire something very, very close to what their parents speak, but not the same, and close to what their contemporaries speak, especially if they go to school. Like they're going to spend a lot of time with kids their age, and so this stuff changes over time. Usually young women are the leaders of change. There's a theory that that's because the primary caretakers for like the next generation, and that there's a theory that young girls are imitating slightly. There's a bunch of theories about it, but basically over and over and over again we see that young women tend to be the drivers of linguistic change. Old guys tend to speak the most conservative variety, young women tend to speak the most advanced variety, and young men tend to sound like young women from like a half a generation before or more. And as I get older, I'm noticing that too. Like men younger than me, like 20 years younger than me, sound to me kind of girly. And it's not because they're kind of girly. It's because of like ongoing language change, where stuff that like girls said when I was a kid, or the women said to children, has become sort of the norm of what's said by adult men now. So next time somebody's like, men aren't manly anymore, it's like, man, it's probably just language change. Like you probably just, it's fine. The one that stood out to me, just as to put a bow on this tangent, is there was a guy in his like mid-20s who said something about like sitting crisscross applesauce. I understand that what I know that as historically is probably not something that people say anymore, but like cross-legged is a thing that people used to say. And it was like just with a straight face, an adult man was like, I'm gonna sit crisscross applesauce, and I'm like, it wasn't ironic. It was just like that's the word he knows for it. So combine that with accent changes, word changes. It's just an interesting pattern in language. End of digression. So here we have these mid, like low, central kind of things. I have never had to use this. some of you may find this useful. I have never been like, I need to let me find the IPA character for this. It just hasn't been part of my life. So now we have covered literally all of the basic sort of reference points for vowels. Hopefully this actually makes sense. So like E, U, like the letters make sense. And then you get into less common vowels and you start getting weirder symbols. Upside down lowercase e is schwa, just the unstressed vowel. Let's see. Yeah, you need phonetically consistent people and they don't make those. That's exactly the right answer. I see in the chat, how did Yemenite Hebrew preserve the original Ghain? That, my understanding is that a lot of Yemenite and Mizrahi and various people who were living among speech communities where the other languages that were spoken also had Ghain, so like Arabic, they preserve it. Whereas those who were further afield did not have Ghain. Although that history is kind of, there's a lot to get into in terms of like the what goes into accents now. Let's see. Do I think French would have been a much different language if it kept a constant amount of change in the writing system? I think it looks different. I think it'd be the same. The number of vowel shifts in French is wild. I remember Don Renge, who's a historical linguist at Penn, teaching a class on this, and like you can see how you go from from the spelling moi, for instance, to moi, and you can be like, oh, I can see how you get there in like 5 steps. And he's like, yes, and that's a plausible pathway, and that's a normal pathway of change that many languages take, but that's not what French did. There's like 21 steps. Don't quote me on the exact numbers, but it's just like way more steps, way more sound changes than you might expect that still kind of end up at the same place. Oh, I didn't get to the back unrounded. Sorry for the Japanese students. I didn't get to the back unrounded high. This is in Japanese. It's in, I don't know. It's in Japanese. And let's actually take a moment because this one that I say is contentious and like French, they all kind of pronounce it differently. Those are very different. Right? I have 2 that are similar and another 2 that are different. So not everybody even agrees about pronunciation, which is wild because this is supposed to be approximately the same point in the mouth and the same rounding and everything. I see in the chat the French conjugation is ridiculous. Every form is phonetically identical, but it's spelled differently. Yep. What got me into the IPA was French because it's like seeing the Matrix. French looks like a completely different language in IPA, and it's a cool language. Like it's very cool, but it looks radically different. So it's like, do you want to pronounce it right, or do you want to have clues as to what the words mean and how they're related to words in English? Turkish as well. Yes, Turkish. Yes. I see. Oh no! Where in France? I see that this is but in France. Yes. You got to tell me how to say that. Put it in IPA. It says that that vowel is a common realization in France for the open O vowel of but. Oh, okay. So, we got a few more minutes, and what I want to cover here is, the IPA chart has the IPA has a slightly different style here. This is one of the things that kind of like they're a little different. Totally different vowel, right? Now, one of the points here is that some of this is contentious. Some people disagree about what exact sound these make, but they're all in the same general neighborhood. The other thing that I wanted to get to is just that most languages do not have just one like steady state vowel. Instead, what you have is like in English, I mentioned we have like E, A, like those are off glides. That is E, and then it's followed by the little IPA J. That's the Y sound. In New York, you have coffee, dog, like ooh. So that's actually starting up by like ooh, and then kind of slowly going all the way down to aw, and it might even continue further. Similarly, different languages have different things. So when you're talking about like, yeah, let's, you know what, let's see if I can copy uy, and let's just, I'm in Wikipedia. I might as well. Let's see what exact vowel that is. Anybody want to take a guess first? Let's see. Do. Usually, this like crossed I. So everybody, like language simp, I know I'm calling you out. I know you we're going to do a 24-hour, 25-hour live stream of pronouncing this. This is a vowel that's in just California English. Like it's for many people in California, that's the vowel in dude. D-U-D-E. Dude. So like I know they got a cool symbol for it in Russian, but like maybe we should write California English with all the letters from other languages that work that way. So let's see. I see a question about standards of style. Like, no, there's no standard style. And actually, when I wrote my dissertation, I kind of waffled a little bit because my advisor follows like an Americanist style, which is different than the IPA. So I talk about like I monophthongization, which is where the diphthong that starts down here at and moves up towards I or E even, as in the words night and time and right and rhyme. That monophthongizes to just right? So a diphthong is two phthongs, two vowels, two sounds. So I think I went with the Americanist style in my dissertation, which is spelling it like AY, which is easier on a typewriter. And it's like, we're talking about English. We know what we're doing. So like, we don't need all this like fancy IPA business. So there's not, I mean, it's still kind of contentious whether you use Americanist stuff. Like I feel like if I had used IPA, especially like the British kind of style of writing, let's see, for those of you who don't know about it, there's type IPA, which I always just Google. Type of hernia, what's going on there? Did I Google some weird stuff? So like, you know, if I had written it like this, I that would have been sort of picking a fight. Hopefully you can see that. Let me just, that's tiny. Whoa. So I, and monophthongization, it would have been like, with a long So when you're thinking about like what's, I don't want a new tab. When you're thinking about what's happening in like, you know, the word no in Australian English, there's some R coloring, but there's like 3 vowels that they go through. It's not just, you know, it's the vowel is the letter O. Like it's not, and you forgive me for, I'm not going to do this right. But you get like, you know, nar. That's like 3 vowels and the third one has R coloring. So there's just, you know, there's a lot going on with vowels. This is the sort of basic points. These are the locations that are sort of home base. But like I said, any given spoken language is going to be, like any word that you actually have, it's not going to be dead on that. Like these are, if you actually map formants, which is a way of looking at this in Hertz, that's a mathematical transformation of the sound wave, then what you end up with is like these big clouds. I actually wrote a paper, didn't really get published, but it got circulated a couple of places where I looked at using just a lot of math to make those clouds like easier to look at statistically. So instead of like these big smears of everything, if you use a Mel frequency Kepstral coefficient transformation, you can start to like, you know, do a higher dimensional space, and then like you can reduce it back down to a 3-dimensional space, but everything's a lot tighter and you can start to separate sounds. That's like really in the weeds, but the idea is that like we're just grouping things into like big sort of chunks in the in our minds in this vowel space, and that these are just places to hang, you know, an idea off of. So you can combine all those, and that's the vowels. That's like all of them. You can do infinite vowels. You can do infinite gradations among or between these. And languages do these glides across. So like New York coffee and Australian no, I still can't do it. I need to work on that. Maybe I'll do a live stream of just working on no. But that's all of it. It's infinite, but also we group it into colors, just like, you know, I guess we group it into sounds just like colors, like red, blue, green, seen the eagle, a boy. Like it may be different categories in a different language, but there's only so many of them, and they all are in this continuous but constrained three-dimensional sound space, which we have represented here with, I guess, 2 dimensions and then pairs of vowels. So that's the vowels. Thank you all for being here. I'll take like a couple of minutes to take a look at the chat and some questions, but I'm going to go. I see my high school textbook for French had IPA, but we never used them. It's so good. I'm using that. I'm learning Canadian French right now to see if I can play a prank. And stay tuned for that. But like the IPA is a game changer here. Let's see. Whatever involves the lips a lot will naturally be different. Yes. But also kind of the same. I seem to be accidentally trying to pin messages and whatever. Let me not do that. Accents, I'll do one later. French is indeed super cool, but the text first way the conjugation is taught makes no sense. Yeah, which of these S's are silent? Which of these T's are silent? Let me just memorize all the silent S's and T's. And that's something that I know a lot of people who study French, they go to speak and they're busy conjugating silent letters in their head. They're like adding silent letters and they don't want to speak because they don't know, which word it is. And it's like, it's all pronounced the same. I forgot the central high mid vowels. Nuh-uh. I did, Hopefully you didn't get an ad right then when I did it, but I did do them. So, and like, dude, and like, dude. Let's see. Why people who speak Semitic language have such a hard time learning English accent? Because there's so many more sounds. You guys have fewer sounds, and you're trying to map a system where you have fewer sounds to a system that has more sounds. Also, pitch and intonation. I've heard Australians pronounce "oh no" like R and R, R and R. I love it. Nar, love it. N, wedge, and an R. Okay, what was the name of the metric or algorithm I used? I'll put that somewhere. Maybe I'll make a video about it. It was measuring the Kepstral coefficients, which there's like 13 of them, and duration and pitch. And then doing a Mel frequency transformation. Mel frequency is just like a non-linear transformation that mimics a little bit more how we hear sounds. And then doing like some dimension reduction, whether it's like, you can take your pick, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Color explanation really makes me feel better about the whole exercise of grouping vowels. Yes, thank you. To me, speaking is like singing a song a cappella. If you have relative pitch, you'll be understood. I like it. See, English is not just an accent. Learning a language to play a prank. This will be my third or fourth, but that's the plan. My goal is if I can deceive members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police into believing that I am from Quebec, then I have succeeded. So don't share this with your Canadian friends. All the Canadians who need to know about it are already in on it. Okay. The ones above the schwa. Yeah, I went through them real fast and said I've never had a use for them, but I'll play them here. And I have a hard time differentiating this like backwards E from like these sound very close to me. All right. Time to wrap up. English has a lot of vowels, not more consonants than a language like Arabic. Jeff Lindsay did have I like his stuff. I like Jeff Lindsay. Maybe I should reach out to him. See if he's going to be at the LSA this year. Russians pronounce closer to mid. Is vowel rounding always binary? Sort of. Like everything else, it's gradient, but we perceive it as binary. So you'll hear, like if you have a language that has rounding or not rounding, then we have this whole range of things that we can do, but we're going to group it as either like rounded or not rounded. I see k-means or other clustering. Yeah, principal component analysis is I think what I did. Let's see. If you say subscribe, the button will be rainbow. Ooh. English vowels and diphthongs are the hardest pronunciation problem for the people for sure. And the same thing, like, I have Dominican friends who are working on English, and it's like the lax vowels being different from their tense counterparts. It's like I being different from E is like really, really hard for people because they just hear it as the same. Those are not meaningfully different to a lot of people in the world. And then English speakers are like, no, no. But then we get upset when French speakers also are like, well, U is different than oo. And same thing with the nasals. Nasality affects some of the formants as well. So you know, you get like, any of these can be nasal, but you get like just let air flow out of your nose by dropping your velum. I love Jeff Lindsay. Please collaborate with him. You know what? I'm going to reach out to him. It's up to him. Ball's going to be in his court. All right. So with that, I've run just over 5 o'clock. So thank you all for your time. I love having the actual feedback and discussion and conversation. By the way, I see Charles Smith. Just before I go, I read this as live versus leave is a big point of confusion, but I realized that you said live versus leave, and that's I and E exactly. Where do you leave? Okay, peach versus pitch, beach versus. All right, that's it. The end. Thank you all. Tune in next time. I got more videos coming out soon. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please like and subscribe, or whatever you can. And, I'll do another Persian live stream pretty soon, probably on Sunday. I'm making swift progress and noticing some really interesting things, including a possible topic for a study that I don't know if anybody's actually written. My secret is that I read textbooks for learning a language, and some of the people who teach that have noticed things that linguists haven't, and we can actually do some accurate study of. And I'll do one. He said, please say a vowel. Ugh. There you go. We're gonna do more streams later, and I will do one with IPA. I'll just say any vowels on request. Let's do that. All right. Thanks again. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Have a good New Year, and hopefully I'll see you all soon.